Good morning. I'm very happy to be back in New York, home with family and very good friends. It's great to be here. A few years ago, we recognized a great need at Unity's world headquarters in Missouri. The work was growing rapidly, and we're so grateful to God for that. But we realized we were running out of space. We knew that it was time to build. So we prayed, and then we talked about it. And we prayed, and we called in some experts, some space utilization consultants. And then we prayed some more. We felt strongly guided to build a new 80,000 square foot building for Silent Unity, our worldwide prayer ministry. In the very beginning, I felt that we needed to have a firm foundation in prayer. So we needed to have some kind of thought to rally behind. And in meditation, I found these words coming to me: centered in God, assured by faith, and prospered by divine love, we boldly move forward to serve humanity by building unity together. Our foundation was affirmative prayer. And then there were meetings with architects. Then there was the bid process and the selection of a general contractor to do the work. And there were regulatory agencies, and there were committees, and there were boards with which to work, and there were design challenges, and construction challenges, and materials challenges, and weather challenges, and so on, and so on, and so on. We had started with a firm foundation in spirit, but slowly, ever so slowly, that we did not even notice, we began to work more and more in the outer and less in the inner. And that led to our being more uptight and more temper flare-ups and more heated exchanges. From this journey, I have learned, or maybe I should relearned, this very great lesson. Living with a focus predominantly in the outer is simply unacceptable. And there was some inner guidance kind of tugging at me, saying, listen to this. It's time to get back to basics. This morning's lecture is a simple message of getting back to basics. Now, I don't know if you need to hear that, but I need to say that. And I'm going to trust God completely to give us what we need together this morning. We're going to explore two very basic ideas that are part of a spiritual approach to abundant living. And the first idea is this: there are three basic components to a human being, and that's very important for us. A person is threefold: spirit, soul, body. And this is the second idea. Whether or not we know it, we are in command of our lives. Whether we are exploring the wilds of Alaska, climbing a mountain, or rafting the raging Colorado River, or managing a multi-million-dollar construction project for the first time in your life, we are in control of our lives. That's my message today. Now, you could go home now, because that's my message. But I would consider it a personal favor if you would stick around for the embellishment. But remember this: if anyone asks you what the lesson was today, it is one, you are spirit, soul, and body, and two, you are in control of your life. Let's talk about the definition of a human being as spirit, soul, body. person is first of all spirit, God individualized. In the beginning was God, and God created everything. So what did God create everything out of? God's substance. That's all there was. And that is spirit. Now, does this mean that you are Almighty God? Well, not really. Is a drop of seawater the same as the ocean? In its makeup it is, but it is not as great as the entire ocean. The drop of water is in the ocean, and the ocean is in the drop of water. We are in God. God is in us, but God is greater. However, we are inseparable from God, except in our mind. And the mind is the second aspect of a human being. Now, the mind in unity terminology is the soul. This is the greatest gift that our Almighty Father and Mother God has given us. We have the ability to think and to feel and to reflect on what we are thinking and feeling as we are doing the thinking and the feeling. The soul is that fantastic part of us that sets us apart from all other creatures. Oh, other creatures may have highly developed brains and maybe in some sense a soul, but not to the extent that we human beings have a soul. God is so great and absolute love, and God is far more than any one of us can begin to imagine. And yet, God does not require absolute loyalty and devotion. God gave us a soul with the ability to choose freely in life. The soul has freedom of choice. It can turn inward and seek and find God, or it can turn to the outer for guidance and direction from the physical world. The third aspect of being is the body, the physical. Now, the physical outer world is not bad. It's just not perfect yet. And we think of the body as the outpicturing of the soul. Now, because the soul can look inward to spirit or look outward to the physical, sometimes the body outpictures something that is not of spirit. In these times, we have what we call health challenges. Now, the outer is not bad. It is not evil. It's simply not perfect or complete yet. As far as we know, only Jesus Christ was able to reach the state of having that total outer body perfection. And he told us we are to follow him and do the things that he did. But people have mistakenly taken too much information from the outer, the physical. And that outer physical will sometimes tell us things like, perfection's impossible. And so, you know what happens then? We begin to outpicture that belief in imperfection. The information that we take into the soul from the outside sometimes tells us things such as we are too old or too young or too poor or too dumb, that our childhoods were too painful and our families were too dysfunctional, that we aren't good enough, there's not enough good things to go around, there are too many bad things for us to overcome. We can only live so long and be so healthy, happy, or prosperous. I don't even like to say that. On the other hand, this is what I like to say. Spirit always tells us we are good enough. We are accomplishers. We are meant to be happy, healthy, prosperous, and whole. We are beloved children of God. We can do, we can be. We are special. Now, Where do you want to go to get your self-concept? The outer or the spirit? The sad fact is most of us, even unity ministers, get far too much information from the outer that we have accepted as the truth. It is as if we did not learn arithmetic correctly, but we thought we did. So every month we would get unhappy notices from the bank explaining that our accounts are out of balance. We would suffer the consequences of frustration, anger, anxiety, and fear over our relationship with the bank. That's not because we are bad people or the bank is a nasty institution, but because we simply misapplied the principles of mathematics. Now, how many of us do something similar to that in our lives? I just did that with the building project because I was not going to Spirit for enough direction in my life. It was not life that was frustrating and anxiety-producing. It was my misapplication of basic principles. Now, fortunately, we can correct our applications or misapplications. There's an old metaphysical saw that tells us if the mind can conceive it and believe it, we can achieve it. Therefore, if we have been conceiving of ourselves and our lives as something less than glorious, beautiful, and special, and friends we have, then we have been believing and achieving the very things that we don't want in life and that have been bringing us pain and suffering. And just as this concept applies to individuals, it applies to gatherings of people. In fact, it applies to the collective consciousness of the entire planet. Can you see this outpicturing of the human race consciousness? Can you see what's happening in the world from that? This is why unity and other consciousness-raising activities are needed so much in the world. Not enough people understand their power to create and demonstrate through the power of their own minds and how much strength there is in the human race consciousness. Dr. Emily Cady wrote in her master work, Lessons in Truth, around the turn of the century, and still applies today, that the cause of all suffering is error thinking. Error thinking. Friends, of our own free will, we have chosen error thinking. And of our own free will, we can and must choose spiritual thinking. We can change. We must change. And I believe we are changing. Do you believe that? Yeah, I do. I do. Now, let me reiterate this premise. The outer is not necessarily bad, but it is incomplete and imperfect at the present time. And if our soul relies totally on the outer for attitudes, for beliefs, and vision, then we're going to get some positive messages and some negative messages. And those negative messages that we take into our soul and allow to find a home there, to stay there, are what I call soul shrinkers. And what we want is soul growth and soul expansion. And that comes from taking direction from Spirit. Now let me pause here for an aside. I'm going to say something that I have said before, but I think it bears repeating. Unity takes a very common sense approach to soul growth. There are those disciplines which require complete denial of the outer and complete withdrawal from the material world. And I would say that there is good from their efforts. But unity takes a more balanced approach. The Apostle Paul shared these words with the church at Rome Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that you may prove what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. And I would say, be in the world, but not too much of the world. The physical world is here for us to enjoy. It is a great laboratory for the soul to grow and unfold. It is ours to use for the betterment of our personal lives and the betterment of the collective life on this planet. But we must go to Spirit first in prayer and meditation, and then live in the world as Spirit directs. That's an unbeatable formula. Now we come to this interesting question. Just how do we go about stretching our souls? Jesus had a final examination just before he was to begin his ministry. And he was asked a trick question. Turn these stones into bread. You see, he was hungry. And that was his trick question. Turn these stones into bread and you will have something to eat. And his reply was very important. Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. Doesn't that sound like what we've been talking about so far? We don't live by the outer things alone, the bread, but rather by going to Spirit, the words of God. That's the key to soul growth. Jesus also gave us an incredible number of mind-stretching ideas. A lot of them are found in the book of Matthew, but they are throughout the Gospels. Now here are some mind stretchers from Jesus, and I've paraphrased one or two of them. Love God, your neighbor, and yourself. And about religious law, he said, the Sabbath was made for man and not man for the Sabbath. Love your enemies and pray for those who are trying to harm you. And if your captor orders you to carry his equipment a mile, carry it another mile. Seek God first in all experiences and do not worry, because it is God's good pleasure to bless you in every needed way. Always play fair and do not lie, cheat, or steal. Don't think wrong thoughts about yourself, your neighbor, or your neighbor's wife. Be private in your prayers. Speak honestly without exaggeration. Pay your taxes and obey the laws of society. He told us to mind our own business, but to love one another and help one another, and don't be fault finders or hypocrites. And he dared to forgive and told us to do the same, always. He told us we are beloved children of God, healers, and the light of the world. He taught us and showed us the way to self-mastery. And he told us to follow him. And he said in John 14, Truly, truly I say to you, he who believes in me will also do the works that I do, and greater works than these will he do, because I go to the Father. Whatever you ask in my name, I will do it, that the Father may be glorified in the Son. If you ask anything in my name, I will do it. These are magnificent mind stretchers that will empower our lives with greatness. But we must put forth great effort to incorporate them into our lives. While Unity does not advocate the life of the ascetic living for 40 years under a tree in contemplation, we do believe that spiritual growth is a full-time project. Spiritual growth requires more than a Sunday go-to-meeting approach. Meditate every day. Read or listen to something inspirational every day. Be conscious and be conscientious. Be alert to the soul stagnators around you. These may be the news or co-workers or family or well-meaning friends. I'm not suggesting we avoid them, but we can silently, mentally bless them. Don't turn on the radio or the television and watch the news broadcast passively. Do you ever do that? You just kind of turn it on and you're there, and all that stuff is pouring into you. Be alert. Be giving your blessing to those situations of tragedy and trouble that are reported in the news. Don't let those items of crime and unhappiness become permanent parts of your thinking and feeling and attitude and belief system. If you let them take up long-term residence in your mind, they will produce a stagnant, decaying state of consciousness which will ultimately outpicture itself in your body and in your world. You have been given dominion and authority over your world. In the first book of the Bible, we read, "Then God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth." I believe that the animals in this passage are symbolically referring to our thoughts and feelings. We don't have much chance of subduing and overpowering the literal animals in life, but we do have the potential of controlling our thoughts. Unity's co-founders, Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, were open-minded. They were spiritually centered individuals, but they did not accomplish very much in their lives until they learned the power of disciplined thought. Once they caught the vision of the power of thoughts and of affirmative prayer, they made great demonstrations in their lives. With the spiritual and the intellectual freedom that is offered by unity, and with our emphasis on individual responsibility, many people have erroneously assumed that it's okay to have an undisciplined mind. Well, it is okay in the sense that unity doesn't have a law prohibiting random or negative thinking. We don't have an external code that says, we'll kick you out of unity if we catch you thinking error thoughts. However, as every one of us who knows the power of the mind has experienced, as every one of us has experienced, error thinking is unhealthy. It is not productive of spiritual growth and unfoldment. So what I'm talking about here is wholesome discipline, not an unhealthy, strict adherence to some external religious dogma. Be true to yourself. That is, be true to your real self, your higher self. Be true to your self-concept that comes from spirit, not the self-concept that has been dictated to you from the outer. Take command of your life. I recently learned of a relatively new company that is very progressive and very prosperous, and their product is so superior to their nearest competitors that people will gladly pay much more for it. This is a humane company with benevolent management practices, and one of the practices of this company is that it allows all the employees to name their own titles. And one cleaning woman chose the title for herself of Supreme Commander. And the company loved it. Now, it sounds kind of funny, doesn't it? But if you think about it, you never have to worry about the Supreme Commander failing to show up for work because she's got a little headache or is a little tired. She calls herself Supreme Commander and she acts like it. I think we can all learn that lesson from the Supreme Commander of that company. And in fact, I'd like us to kind of work with that right now. Have you ever called yourself Supreme Commander? Have you ever wanted to? You're going to get your chance. I am supreme commander of my life. Would you say that with me? I am supreme commander of my life. And again, I am supreme commander of my life. Doesn't that feel good? Yeah, it does. Television is not my commander. The evening news is not my commander. What my friends and relatives said about me when I was growing up, that's not my commander. My teachers, what they said about me, that's not my commander. My doctor is not my commander. The economy is not my commander. The bureaucracy is not my commander. I am my own commander, and I am special. And do you know what day this is, by the way? It is the greatest day of my life up until now. Why? Because I have chosen to be supreme commander of my life. And as supreme commander, I decide what information I respond to. I determine whether my reports are going to come from the imperfect, incomplete sources in the outer or from spirit. Some years ago, Charles Fillmore wrote an article titled "The Non-Reality of Matter." It was never published, but a Unity minister found it and began to make copies of it and circulate it. And to me, that's an exciting and challenging concept, and I find it freeing and uplifting. It confirms my belief that I am in command of my world, and I can be happy because my true world is spiritual. Now, stretch your mind with me to understand that our world is spiritual and mental. This outer thing that we see and feel and taste and touch and smell, if it is real at all, it is but a tiny, tiny part of the overall scheme of things. The outer things are but the final tip of an incredibly vast, rich world in which we live. And this outer appearance is the outpicturing of the soul. The soul of us as individuals and the collective consciousness of everyone on this planet. And you may say, well, that's a fine theory, but it's a little bit too pie in the sky for me. You don't know the troubles I've seen. Sometimes Unity gets accused of not talking enough about hell. It seems that if you're in religious thought, you should talk about hell a lot. I talk about hell. I know it too well. You see, I've been there, and I didn't like it much, and I came very close to staying there and giving up. Hell is when you feel unhappy with life and you feel powerless to do anything about it. You don't have to die to go there, but friends, if you decide to stay there, you're already dead. Heaven is choosing to be in command of your life and accepting responsibility for your life and doing something with your life. I'd like to share a poem with you that means a lot to me. Some would say it's not unity, some would say it's not spiritual, and some might even say it's negative. And I guess it's true in a sense. And still it's important and it deserves to be shared in the context of this lecture. It's familiar to most of us. I had to memorize it in high school. Maybe you did too. It's called Invictus by Ernest Henley. It contains some gloomy ideas and a somewhat hellish thought or two. You see, Mr. Henley developed a bone disease when he was 12 years old, and he had one leg amputated. And some years later, his doctors wanted to take his other leg. He was 24 years old, a young man in what we would consider the prime of life, when he entered the hospital in Edinburgh. And under the care of the famous medical pioneer Joseph Lister, Henley endured 20 months of experimental treatment, and his leg was saved. He knew pain, and he knew suffering, and he faced the worst that life can give. And still, in the face of seeming tragedy, he made a free choice to be supreme commander of his life. From his hospital bed, looking at his own personal hell, he found within himself the courage to proclaim, "Out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole, I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloody but unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horror of the shade, and yet the menace of the years finds and shall find me unafraid. It matters not how strait the gate, how charged with punishments the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul." Friends, no matter what life dishes out, no matter what the stock market does, no matter what slings and arrows of outrageous fortune befall us, one truth remains. We have the freedom to choose to be supreme commander of our lives. Now, to close our time together this morning, I'd like to do something just a little different. I believe that we are all ready to be promoted to a new rank in life, that of supreme commander. And I believe that we are not going to settle for allowing outer events and circumstances to take command of our lives any longer, are we? But before we can be promoted, we must pass our own exam. And therefore, I'm going to give you a pop quiz to see if you have been paying attention. And actually, because it's so important for all of us to succeed together, I'm going to review with you the answers. First answer. This is the first answer. Pay attention. The greatest day of my life up until now. Now say it with me so you won't forget it. The greatest day of my life up until now. And the second answer is, I am. Say that with me. I am. Now, get ready for the test. First question, what day is this? The greatest day of my life up until now. Second question, who is in command of your life? I am. Congratulations. You all have qualified for the promotion. So under the authority of the law of the land and in the name of the Holy Spirit, I hereby acknowledge your divine right to be called supreme commander of your life, and I salute the divinity in you. God bless you. Amen.